Commander Jack Morrison walked through the eastern gardens of the Valkren Imperial Palace, his experienced eye cataloging security vulnerabilities with practiced efficiency. The gardens were beautiful, elaborate landscaping featuring native Valkren plants that created stunning visual displays of color and texture. Ornamental water features provided soothing ambient sound. Winding paths created intimate spaces perfect for diplomatic conversations. They were also a security nightmare. Too many blind spots created by hedge walls and decorative structures. Multiple access points from various palace wings and external grounds. Insufficient camera coverage in several zones. And those water features, aesthetically striking but presenting hazards that no one seemed to have properly assessed. Jack was a security consultant, assigned by Earth's diplomatic corps to advise the Valkren Empire on protecting their facilities during the current period of increased human-Valkren cooperation. 5 months into the assignment, he'd learned to navigate Valkren protocols while maintaining his professional standards. The Valkren themselves were striking, humanoid enough that basic interaction felt intuitive, but distinctly alien in their long, elegant ears adorned with jewelry denoting status, their amber or silver eyes, their movements that carried almost too much grace. Their culture was built on honor, tradition, and sacred obligations that Jack was still learning to fully understand. Today's inspection was routine, documenting the garden's security status before an upcoming diplomatic reception. Jack took notes on his datapad, marking areas needing additional coverage. He was examining one of the larger ornamental pools when he heard a child scream, high-pitched, terrified, cutting off suddenly in a way that made his combat instincts fire immediately. Jack ran toward the sound without thinking, rounding a decorative hedge wall to find chaos. A young Valkren girl, maybe 8 years old by human reckoning, had fallen into the ornamental pool. But this wasn't a shallow decorative fountain. The pool was deep, part of an elaborate water circulation system that created aesthetically pleasing currents and flows. Those same currents were now dragging the girl toward an intake grate with hydraulic force that looked terrifying. The girl was struggling, panicking, being pulled inexorably toward the grate where she'd either be pinned or potentially pulled through into maintenance tunnels where she'd drown. Her attendants, 3 adult Valkren in formal serving attire, were screaming for help but frozen at the pool's edge, clearly too terrified to enter the water. Palace guards were running toward the scene from their posts, but they were too far away. The girl had maybe 30 seconds before the current pulled her completely under. Jack didn't hesitate or calculate risks. He just moved. He kicked off his shoes and dove into the pool, the water shockingly cold against his skin. The current was stronger than it looked from outside. He could feel it pulling at him immediately, trying to drag him toward the same intake that had the girl. She was thrashing weakly now, going under. Jack swam hard, fighting the current, and got his arms around her small body. She panicked harder when he grabbed her, fighting him with surprising strength for someone so young. Jack tried to remember childhood water safety training. Don't let a drowning person drag you under, control their movements, keep their head above water. But the current was brutal. Even with Jack's considerable strength and swimming ability, it was pulling them both toward the intake grate. He got his feet planted against the pool's decorative edge and pulled with everything he had, fighting hydraulic force that felt like it would rip his arms from their sockets. His lungs were burning. The girl had gone completely limp in his arms, either unconscious from panic or from taking in water. Jack made one final desperate effort, leveraging his weight and strength in ways that made his muscles scream in protest. He broke free of the current's grip and surged toward the surface. His head broke the water and he gasped air, keeping the girl's face above the surface. Her attendants were screaming at the pool's edge, reaching for her. Jack swam to the edge, much easier now that he was clear of the current zone, and lifted the girl up. The attendants pulled her out with frantic urgency, laying her on the decorative stonework. She was coughing up water, which meant she was breathing. Alive. Jack hauled himself out of the pool, water streaming from his clothes, his entire body shaking from adrenaline and exhaustion. Palace guards arrived in formation, immediately securing the area with professional efficiency that Jack's security consultant brain noted approvingly even in his current state. A medical team rushed in within 2 minutes, response time that was impressively fast, and swarmed the girl with equipment that was far more sophisticated than would normally be deployed for a random child's accident. That's when Jack started processing details he'd missed in the urgency of rescue. The attendants were addressing the girl as Your Highness. The guards were using royal protection protocols. The medical team's equipment and focused intensity suggested they were treating someone of extreme importance. Princess Kiera, one of the guards said into his communicator, his voice carrying barely controlled urgency. Secure. Minor injuries from pool accident. The human security consultant pulled her from the water, medical team on site. Jack's brain processed that information with dawning realization. He just saved Princess Kiera, the 8-year-old daughter of Queen Seris, the heir to the Valkren throne. The scene transformed into even more controlled chaos within minutes. Additional guards arrived, establishing a security perimeter that pushed back the growing crowd of palace staff and curious onlookers. Senior palace officials appeared, looking terrified, probably realizing how close they'd come to catastrophic tragedy under their watch. The medical team worked with intense focus, treating the princess for water inhalation, checking for injuries, monitoring her vital signs with equipment that beeped and displayed readouts in Valkren medical notation Jack couldn't decipher. And then Queen Seris herself arrived. Jack had met her briefly during his initial security consultations, formal introductions, professional courtesy, the kind of interaction where he'd been acutely aware of addressing absolute royalty. She was known for being brilliant and controlled, ruling with strategic precision for 15 years since assuming the throne. Every briefing described her as careful, measured, someone who never let emotion interfere with duty. But the woman who rushed into the garden now was not that controlled monarch. She was a mother whose child had nearly died. Seris dropped to her knees beside where the medical team was treating Kiera, her hands shaking as she touched her daughter's face, her perfectly styled hair disheveled from running, her formal robes showing none of the usual perfect arrangement. "Kiera," she said, and her voice broke on the name. "Sweetheart, can you hear me?" "Mama," Kiera said weakly, coughing up more water. "Mama, I fell in the water. It was pulling me and I couldn't get out and—" "SHH, you're safe now." "You're safe, I'm here." Seris looked at the medical team lead. "Her condition." "Water inhalation, Your Majesty. Some trauma from the currents and impact with the grate, but vital signs are stabilizing. She'll be fine with treatment." The relief that washed over Seris's face was so profound that Jack felt like he was intruding on something intensely private just by witnessing it. Only after the medical team assured her that Kiera was stable did Seris seem to remember there were other people present. She looked around, clearly trying to piece together what had happened, and her eyes landed on Jack, still standing awkwardly to the side, dripping wet, trying to be unobtrusive during this intensely personal family moment. One of the attendants said something quickly in formal Valkren, gesturing toward Jack. Seris stood and turned to face him fully, and the expression on her face made Jack deeply uncomfortable. It was too intense, too grateful, too much emotion directed at him. "You saved her," Seris said, and her voice carried emotion that cracked straight through any royal composure. "You pulled my daughter from the water. You saved her life." "Just doing what anyone would do, Your Majesty," Jack said, feeling awkward and underdressed and completely out of place. "No child should be left to drown." "But many would have," Seris said, moving closer to him. "Many would have frozen in panic or waited for guards to arrive or hesitated too long calculating risks. You didn't. You acted immediately, at personal risk to yourself, and you saved my daughter's life." She was looking at him with an intensity that made Jack want to take a step back. Your Majesty, I'm just glad I was here, glad I could help. What matters is that Princess Kira is safe. That is not all that matters, Seris said, and there was something almost frightening in her voice now, something fierce and absolute and carrying weight Jack didn't fully understand. You have created a life debt, Commander Morrison. Under Valkren law, under traditions older than this palace, older than this city, I owe you everything for saving my child. Such debts are sacred, she continued, her voice carrying complete conviction. They cannot be dismissed with simple gratitude or repaid with gold or titles or favors. You saved the heir to my throne. You saved my daughter, and that creates obligation that will bind us both for the rest of our lives. Jack had no idea how to respond to that. He'd saved a child from drowning because it was the right thing to do. He hadn't wanted or expected anything beyond knowing she was safe. But the way Queen Seris was looking at him suggested that this was far more complicated than he'd realized. That by saving one life, he'd irrevocably tied his fate to a throne, to a queen, to obligations and bonds he didn't yet understand, and that nothing in his life would ever be quite the same again. 3 days after pulling Princess Kira from the ornamental pool, Commander Jack Morrison was summoned to a formal audience with Queen Seris. He'd been through endless debriefings in those 3 days, security officers wanting detailed accounts of the incident, palace officials investigating how Princess Kira had been inadequately supervised, engineers examining the pool's current system and why it hadn't been properly flagged as dangerous. Jack had provided his account multiple times, focusing on the technical security failures rather than the dramatic aspects of the rescue. The pool's intake system was poorly designed for a public space. The attendants had insufficient emergency response training. Camera coverage had blind spots that prevented early detection of the princess entering the dangerous area. All facts, all professional observations. All ways to avoid thinking too much about the look on Queen Seris's face when she'd said he'd created a life debt. But this summons was different. It was held in the throne room, the grand formal space where the Queen received ambassadors and made official pronouncements. Full court attendance was required, meaning hundreds of Valkren nobles and officials would witness whatever was about to happen. Jack wore his dress uniform, feeling acutely aware of being human in a space designed to showcase Valkren power and tradition. The architecture itself seemed to demand reverence. Soaring ceilings painted with historical scenes, crystalline surfaces that refracted light in patterns representing thousands of years of continuous rule. Queen Seris sat on her throne in full royal regalia, elaborate robes that combined practical armor with symbolic decoration, her long ears adorned with the traditional ornaments of absolute authority, her posture perfect and commanding. She looked every bit the absolute monarch described in all the briefings, controlled, powerful, someone who ruled billions across multiple star systems. But Jack had seen her 3 days ago, kneeling beside her daughter with tears in her eyes and her hands shaking. He knew the person beneath the royal performance. The formal proceedings began with ritual phrases Jack had learned to recognize if not fully understand. Acknowledgements of authority, invocations of tradition, the careful dance of court protocol. Then Sarah spoke about the incident, and her voice carried genuine emotion beneath the formal words. 3 days ago, Commander Jack Morrison, human security consultant to this court, saved the life of Princess Kira. My daughter fell into the ornamental pool in the eastern gardens. The current dragged her toward the intake system where she would have drowned, had Commander Morrison not immediately acted. He dove into the water without hesitation, fought the current at significant personal risk, and pulled my daughter to safety. His quick action and courage saved the heir to my throne, saved my child. Seris rose from her throne, a gesture that caused immediate murmurs throughout the assembled court. Queens didn't stand during formal proceedings except for the most significant moments. Under Valkren law and tradition, When someone saves the life of a royal child, a sacred obligation is created, a life debt of the highest order. This is not symbolic. This is not ceremonial. This is binding, absolute and permanent. She looked directly at Jack, and he felt hundreds of eyes following her gaze. Commander Morrison, you saved my daughter's life. Under our oldest and most sacred laws, I owe you everything. My throne, my resources, my personal protection and favor, all are bound to you by obligation that cannot be dismissed, cannot be reduced, cannot be repaid through any normal means. You have earned standing in this court beyond any formal rank, Seris continued, her voice carrying absolute conviction. You have earned protection under my personal authority that supersedes normal hierarchy. You have earned claim upon my gratitude and service that will last for both our lifetimes. Jack felt the weight of hundreds of gazes, shock, curiosity, in some cases clear hostility from nobles who didn't appreciate a human being granted such unprecedented status. Your Majesty, Jack said carefully, aware that protocol required him to respond to a direct address. I appreciate the recognition of what happened, but I don't need or want anything in return. I saved Princess Kira because it was the right thing to do. Any reward beyond knowing she's safe is unnecessary. This is not about what you want or need, Seris said, but her voice was gentle rather than sharp. This is about what our laws and traditions require when a life debt of this magnitude is created. You saved the heir to my throne, Commander Morrison. You saved the most precious thing in my entire life. Her voice wavered slightly on that last sentence, breaking through the formal delivery. I am formally declaring before this court that Commander Jack Morrison stands under my personal protection and favor, that he has the right to call upon me for anything within my power to grant, that I owe him a debt I can never fully repay, but will spend my life attempting to honor. The formal ceremony continued with more ritual phrases in ancient Valkren, legal declarations establishing Jack's new status, witnesses attesting to the life debt, all the procedural elements that made it officially recognized by law and tradition. Jack understood maybe half of it through his implant's translation, but the weight of it was unmistakable. He'd been bound to the royal family in ways that fundamentally changed his position in Valkren society. After the ceremony concluded, after the court was dismissed, Seris requested a private audience, just her, Jack, and minimal security presence. They met in one of the palace's smaller receiving rooms, far less grand than the throne room but still elegant and formal. Seris had removed some of the most elaborate royal regalia, looking more like the person Jack had briefly met during security consultations, rather than the absolute monarch from the ceremony. I need you to understand what just happened, Seris said once they were alone. This isn't just ceremonial recognition. Life debts are sacred in our culture, Commander Morrison. What I owe you is real, absolute, and permanent. Your Majesty, with all respect, I saved a child because that's what any decent person would do. I don't want reward or recognition or— I know, Seris interrupted gently. That's part of why this debt weighs so heavily on me. You acted without thought of reward or recognition or political advantage. You simply saw a child in danger and chose to help, regardless of who that child was or what saving her might earn you. That selflessness makes the obligation even more profound, she continued. You didn't save Kira to create a debt. You saved her because it was right. That makes what I owe you even more sacred than if you'd acted with expectation of reward. But Jack, may I call you Jack in private? At his nod, she continued. You need to understand the political reality you've just entered. By saving Kira, by creating this life debt, you've been tied to the throne in ways that will affect the rest of your life. Seris moved to sit across from him, her posture less formally rigid. Some in my court will see you as a threat, an outsider, a human, suddenly granted unprecedented influence and standing. They'll worry about what you might demand, how you might leverage this debt for personal or political gain. Others will try to use you as a path to my favor. They'll attempt to befriend you, influence you, manipulate you into supporting their agendas or making requests on their behalf. You'll face scrutiny far beyond what your consultant position normally brings. People will watch everything you do, looking for signs of how you intend to use your new status. You'll face political maneuvering, possibly outright hostility from those who resent a human being granted this kind of standing. I'm offering you protection from the worst of that, Seris said, but I'm also warning you. Your life just became significantly more complicated, in ways you probably can't fully anticipate yet. I can handle complicated, Your Majesty, Jack said. What I'm more concerned about is you feeling obligated to give me things I don't want or need. I saved your daughter. That's reward enough, knowing she's safe. I don't feel obligated, Seris said, and her voice carried intensity that made Jack look at her directly. I am obligated by law and sacred tradition, yes, but I'm also genuinely, personally grateful in ways I can barely express properly. You saved my daughter, Jack. You saved Kira. She's 8 years old. She has her whole life ahead of her. And she almost died because of inadequate security protocols and insufficient supervision, and a dangerous pool design that no one had properly assessed. Seris's voice was shaking now, royal composure cracking. 3 days ago, I came within minutes of losing the most important person in my entire life, of losing my child. And the only reason I didn't is because you were there, and you acted immediately without hesitation or concern for your own safety. How do I repay that? She asked, and Jack saw tears forming in her eyes. How do I express what it means to a mother that someone saved her child? There aren't words adequate for that. There aren't rewards sufficient for that. All I can do is acknowledge the debt and try to honor it for the rest of my life. So thank you, Seris said, letting the tears fall now. Not as queen to consultant, not as formal acknowledgement of ceremonial debt, but as a mother whose child you rescued. Thank you for saving her. Thank you for being there. Thank you for caring enough to act when you didn't have to. Jack felt his own throat tighten with emotion. You're welcome, he said simply. I'm just glad I was there, glad I could help. Kira is an amazing kid, bright, curious, kind. The world is better with her in it. I'm honored I could play a small part in making sure she stays in it. Seris smiled through her tears. Not so small a part, I think, but thank you for saying so. She stood composing herself with visible effort. The life debt is real, Jack, whether you seek to claim anything from it or not. Over the following months, Jack's life transformed in ways both subtle and profound. The life debt wasn't just a formal declaration made in a throne room and then forgotten. It had real, practical implications that affected his daily existence. His quarters were upgraded from the guest wing to rooms in the palace's royal section, a level of accommodation far beyond what any security consultant would normally warrant. The quarters were beautiful, yes, but also strategically significant. They placed him within the secured inner palace, where only royal family and essential staff resided. He was included in security briefings that involved Queen Seris's personal safety, not just facility assessments. His recommendations were given weight that went well beyond his official consultant role. When Jack suggested protocol changes, they were implemented quickly with minimal pushback. Most significantly, he was given unrestricted access to Princess Kira. Normally, access to the heir was carefully controlled. Family, essential tutors and caregivers, senior officials with specific duties, that was it. Everyone else interacted with the princess only through carefully arranged and monitored channels. But Seris made clear that Jack was welcome to visit Kira whenever he wished, that his presence was valued, that the connection between rescuer and rescued was something she wanted to honor and maintain rather than allowing it to fade into distant formality. Jack started visiting Kira regularly. It was awkward at first. He wasn't particularly experienced with children. His career had focused on security work, not childcare. And she was a princess, raised with protocols and expectations completely alien to him. But Kira made it easy. She was bright and genuinely curious, asking endless questions about Earth, about humans, about Jack's life before coming to the Valkren court. She showed him her favorite books, elaborate illustrated volumes telling Valkren legends and histories. She taught him games played by Valkren children, laughing when he inevitably made mistakes with rules he didn't quite understand. "You saved me from drowning," she said during one of his early visits, with the blunt honesty of an 8-year-old. "Mama says you were very brave." "I just did what needed to be done," Jack said. "Anyone would have done the same." "The attendants didn't," Kira pointed out. "They just screamed. The guards were too far away. You were the only one who actually helped me." "Well, I'm glad I was there," Jack said. "Me too," Kira said seriously. "I was scared. The water was pulling me and I couldn't get away and I thought I was going to die. But then you grabbed me, and even though I was still scared, I knew you'd get me out. I trusted you." That simple statement of trust from a child he'd saved hit Jack harder than any formal ceremony or royal declaration. Over weeks and months, they developed genuine friendship that went beyond the dramatic circumstances of their first meeting. Jack told Kira about Earth, about oceans and mountains, about human cities and the International Space Station, about his own childhood growing up in Colorado with mountains visible from his bedroom window. Kira showed him secret passages in the palace that only someone who'd lived there her whole life would know, taught him phrases in ancient Valkren that even his translation implant struggled with, explained court politics with the kind of insight that suggested she paid far more attention than adults probably realized. Queen Seris watched this developing relationship with visible approval and something that looked like relief. "She's been different since the accident," Seris told Jack during one of their increasingly frequent conversations. "More cautious, more easily frightened, especially around water. The palace psychologists say it's normal trauma response, that it will fade with time and support. But with you," Seris continued, "she relaxes completely. She trusts you without reservation. That's invaluable to me as her mother, knowing she has someone besides me that she feels completely safe with." Jack also spent increasing amounts of time with Seris herself. Initially, their interactions focused on Kira, discussing her well-being, her education, security arrangements to ensure nothing like the pool incident could happen again. But gradually, their conversations expanded to other topics. Seris asked his opinion on broader security matters, palace protocols, protection for diplomatic events, threat assessment for various political situations. She valued his perspective not just on technical security but on human Valkren relations and how increased cooperation might create new risks or opportunities. They discussed governance philosophy, how Valkren tradition-based authority differed from human democratic systems, what each approach offered, and what it cost. They talked about the challenges of rule, the weight of responsibility for billions of lives, the isolation that came with absolute power. Jack found himself genuinely enjoying Seris's company in ways that had nothing to do with her being a queen. She was brilliant, insightful, funny in unexpected ways when her formal persona relaxed. She asked questions that suggested genuine interest rather than just political courtesy, and she trusted him in ways that seemed to surprise her as much as him. 6 months after the rescue, Seris summoned Jack for a private dinner, not a formal state function with dozens of attendees, but a personal meal in her private quarters. "I need to ask you something," Seris said once they were settled with food and minimal staff presence. "Your consulting contract officially ends in 3 months. I want you to stay. Not as temporary consultant, but as permanent security advisor with special responsibility for Kira's protection." "Your Majesty, I appreciate the offer, but—" "Seris," she interrupted. "When we're private like this, please call me Seris, and let me finish my thought before you refuse. I'm asking you to stay for several reasons. First, Kira trusts you more than anyone except me. Having you here, having regular contact with you, is genuinely beneficial for her emotional well-being and development. Second, your judgment on security matters is excellent. You see vulnerabilities my own people miss because you bring outside perspective. Your recommendations have already prevented 2 potential incidents that my security forces acknowledge they would have missed. Third, Seris paused. Because I trust you completely. That's rare for someone in my position, Jack. Most people who interact with me want something: political favor, advancement, validation of their agenda. You've never asked for anything despite having every right to claim significant rewards based on the life debt. You simply show up, spend time with Kira because you genuinely care about her, offer advice because you want to help rather than because you're seeking advantage. That kind of integrity is invaluable. So I'm asking, will you stay? Will you accept a permanent position that keeps you here, keeps you part of Kira's life, keeps you? She hesitated. Keeps you part of my court and my life. Jack considered the implications carefully. Staying meant leaving Earth permanently, or at least for the indefinite future. It meant building a life here among the Valkren, accepting a role that was as much personal as professional. It meant continuing to navigate the complex politics that came with having such unprecedented access to the royal family. But he also realized he didn't actually want to leave. He'd grown to genuinely care about Kira, enjoyed seeing her learn and grow, took satisfaction in knowing she felt safe with him. He valued his conversations with Seris, both the professional discussions about security and governance, and the more personal conversations about life and responsibility, and the challenge of maintaining your humanity when everyone sees you as an institution. What they were building here, this connection between him, Kira, and Seris, that mattered to him in ways that went beyond professional achievement. "I'll stay," Jack said. "Not because of the life debt or any sense of obligation, but because I want to. Because what we're building here, this partnership, this friendship, that matters to me. Kira matters to me, and you." He paused. "You matter to me too, Seris." The relief and genuine happiness on Seris's face made Jack certain he'd made the right choice. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for saying yes, for caring about Kira, for being someone I can actually trust without reservation. That means more than I can properly express." As months stretched into years, Jack became thoroughly integrated into the royal household. He was Kira's most trusted guardian beyond her mother, the person she turned to when she was upset or excited or confused, who attended her formal functions and celebrated her informal achievements with equal enthusiasm. He was Seris's most valued security advisor, yes, but also her friend and confidant, someone she could discuss difficult decisions with, who would offer honest perspective even when it contradicted what she wanted to hear. The court learned to work with and around Jack's unusual position. Some nobles remained skeptical of a human having such influence, but they couldn't deny that he used that influence responsibly, never seeking personal advantage or pushing agendas beyond genuine security concerns and Kira's well-being. But Jack was also increasingly aware that his relationship with Seris had evolved into something neither of them quite knew how to name. They spent hours together daily, ostensibly discussing security or Kira or state matters, but often just talking, sharing perspectives, finding comfort in each other's presence, building intimacy that had nothing to do with professional roles. The line between advisor and friend, between rescuer bound by sacred debt and something more personal, had blurred so gradually that Jack couldn't identify when it happened. He just knew that seeing Seris smile genuinely made his day better, that he looked forward to their conversations more than anything else in his schedule, that somewhere along the way she'd stopped being the queen in his mind and become simply Seris, someone he cared about deeply. And he suspected she felt the same way, which created complications neither of them was quite ready to address. Not yet, but soon. 2 years after Jack pulled Princess Kira from that ornamental pool, political pressure on Queen Seris to remarry intensified significantly. She'd been widowed for 8 years. Her consort had died when Kira was only 2 years old, killed in a transport accident that was still investigated as possible sabotage, though nothing was ever proven. Seris had ruled alone since then, focusing on governance and raising Kira without the complications of trying to navigate a new partnership while managing an empire. But conservative factions in her court argued she'd mourned long enough, that the throne needed the stability a consort provided, that Kira needed a father figure, that Seris should select an appropriate match and formalize a partnership that would strengthen the realm through strategic alliance. Several noble houses presented formal proposals, politically advantageous matches that would consolidate power, create useful alliances, bring additional resources or influence to the throne. Jack watched these developments with complicated feelings he tried very hard not to examine too closely. He'd grown to care deeply for Seris over 2 years. What had started as professional respect and gratitude for how she'd handled the life debt situation had evolved into genuine friendship, and somewhere along the way had deepened into something more. He admired her brilliance and dedication. He valued their partnership and the trust they'd built. He found himself wanting to be near her, to make her smile, to support her through the impossible challenges of rule. He'd fallen in love with her. But she was a queen. He was a human security advisor. The barriers were obvious and seemingly insurmountable: cultural differences, political complications, the sheer impossibility of a Valkren queen formalizing partnership with a human. So Jack tried not to think about how much it hurt watching noble houses present marriage proposals to the woman he loved. One evening, Seris summoned him to her private chambers, something that had become routine over 2 years but still carried weight, still felt significant in ways that went beyond their professional relationship. "I need your advice," Seris said once they were alone, "not as security advisor but as friend, as someone I trust completely. Can I ask that?" "Always," Jack said, settling into his usual chair across from her. Seris showed him several formal documents, the marriage proposals from various noble houses. "My advisors are strongly pushing me to select one of these," she said, her voice carrying frustration. "They argue that Kira needs a father figure in her life beyond just having you around unofficially, that the throne needs the stability and appearance of complete royal household, that I've been widowed long enough and duty requires I remarry." "What do you want?" Jack asked, though the question made his chest ache. "I want to choose based on what's actually best for Kira and myself rather than what's politically optimal," Seris said. "I want genuine partnership with someone I trust and respect, rather than strategic arrangement with someone who sees me primarily as political asset and opportunity for advancement." She looked at Jack with an intensity that made his heart race uncomfortably. "I want what I already have with you, the partnership, the trust, the genuine care and friendship and—" She stopped herself. "But that's impossible because you're human and I'm a Valkren queen, and the political complications would be enormous, and I shouldn't even be thinking this way." Jack's pulse was pounding in his ears. "Seris, what exactly are you saying?" "I'm saying that in 2 years, you've become the most important person in my life besides Kira," Seris said, the words coming faster now. "I'm saying that I trust you more than anyone, value your counsel beyond anyone else's, find myself wanting to share everything with you because you see me as Seris rather than just as queen. I'm saying I've fallen in love with you," she continued, her voice shaking slightly. "And I don't know what to do with that because acknowledging it means confronting that I want something that seems politically and culturally impossible, that I want to choose you over any of these appropriate Valkren noble matches, but I don't know if that's even an option I'm allowed to seriously consider." Jack stood and crossed the distance between them, his heart pounding so hard he could barely think straight. "I love you too," he said. "I've been trying not to acknowledge it because you're a queen and I'm a security advisor and the barriers seemed insurmountable. But I do. I love you, Seris. I love your brilliance and your dedication and your dry sense of humor. I love how much you care about Kira and your people. I love the person you are when you let the royal mask drop. I love you." Sarah stood as well, and they were suddenly very close, both trembling slightly with emotion and the weight of what they were acknowledging. "What do we do with that?" Sarah asked. "When I'm supposed to marry a Valkren noble for political advantage, and you're human, and the opposition would be significant, and the precedent would be unprecedented. We choose what matters over what's politically convenient," Jack said. "Seris, 2 years ago you told me I'd created a life debt, that you owed me everything for saving Kira. I never wanted to claim anything from that debt. Saving her was reward enough. But if you're serious about wanting genuine partnership based on trust and love rather than political calculation, then I'm claiming it now. I'm asking you to honor that debt by choosing me. Not because you owe me, but because you want to. Because what we have, this trust, this partnership, this love, that's worth more than any strategic alliance." Sarah stared at him, hope and fear warring in her expression. "You're asking me to make you my consort, a human consort to a Valkren queen. That's completely unprecedented. The political opposition would be intense. Some factions would never accept it. The complications would be enormous." "I know," Jack said, "but you're a queen. You have the authority to make unprecedented choices when you believe they're right. The question is whether you're willing to fight for what you actually want rather than accepting what tradition dictates. And if I fight and lose, if the opposition is too strong, if I'm forced to choose between you and political stability, then we'll deal with that if it happens," Jack said. "But Seris, you're one of the strongest people I've ever met. If you decide this is what you want, I believe you can make it happen. The question is it what you want?" "Yes," Sarah said, and her voice grew stronger, more certain. "Yes, it's what I want. You saved my daughter, Jack. You gave me back what matters most. And in the 2 years since, you've given me something equally precious. Genuine partnership with someone who sees me as a person, who I can trust completely, who makes me want to be better while accepting me as I am. That's worth fighting for," she said. "That's worth facing political opposition and cultural complications and all the challenges that will come with choosing a human consort. You're worth fighting for." Jack pulled her into an embrace that felt like coming home. "Then we fight," he said. "Together, whatever comes, we face it together." The announcement that Queen Seris intended to formalize partnership with Commander Jack Morrison created the political earthquake everyone had anticipated. Conservative factions were outraged. The Queen should choose a Valkren noble, not a human. This violated tradition, set dangerous precedent, suggested the Queen valued personal preference over political duty. But progressive voices supported it as bold demonstration of the deepening human-Valkren alliance, as evidence that Seris would choose the best partner rather than accepting mere political convenience. The debate was intense, divisive, and consumed the court for months. But Seris held firm. She made clear this was not negotiable, that Jack standing through the life debt gave him position beyond normal hierarchy, that her choice of consort was within her authority as queen, that she would accept counsel, but ultimately the decision was hers to make. She also pointed out that Jack had proven himself over 2 years, had cared for Kira with genuine dedication, had served her court with integrity, had earned trust that was more valuable than any political connection. The formal bonding ceremony happened 8 months after their private acknowledgement of love, in the same throne room where Seris had first declared the life debt. It blended Valkren royal traditions with human elements, creating something new that honored both cultures. Kira stood beside them during the ceremony, beaming with joy that the man who'd saved her life and become her trusted guardian was now formally becoming her father. "I owe you everything for saving my daughter," Seris said during her formal vows. "But I'm choosing you as my consort not from obligation but from love. You gave me back my child, and you gave me yourself, your trust, your partnership, your genuine care. That's worth more than any political alliance could ever provide. I choose you, Jack responded, his voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment. Not because of life debts or ancient obligations, but because you're brilliant and brave and you value truth over convenience. Because loving you and loving Kiera has become the most important part of my life. Because I want to stand beside you, support you, face whatever comes together. I choose you, Seris, today and always. Years later, their partnership would be studied as unprecedented example of cross-species royal bonding, analyzed for its political and cultural implications, debated by scholars and politicians. But for Jack, Seris, and Kiera, it was simpler than academic analysis suggested. A family built not on tradition or political calculation, but on love, trust, and the bond created when one person saves a child, and a queen